Good afternoon. Welcome to the Arizona edition of our webinar series exploring state findings from American Farmland Trust recently released Farms Under Threat 2040, Choosing an Abundant Future. Let me start with a quick reminder about some logistics, and you can see here our agenda for the hour together. You see here on the right-hand side a control panel. The control panel is how you can ask a question and how you can get to handouts. At the top of that panel is a little orange arrow. If you click on that, that shrinks the control panel, which you may want to do when we get to the maps if it's in your way and you can't see the maps. And then if you pop it back out, you will see a questions tab. If you go to the right side of that tab and you see a little square with an arrow coming out of it, if you click on that, it'll pop open the questions bar and you can type in a question or a comment, and we will be getting to questions at the end of the webinar. Also, right below questions, you'll see a handouts section. If you pop that open, it gives you a link to both the full Farms Under Threat 2040 report, as well as the 2-page Arizona summary, which we will be talking about in a minute. So we are recording the webinar. We will send everybody a link of the recording, and if you want to share that, please do so with anyone who you think might be interested. So with that, let me introduce myself and my co-host. I'm Chris Coffin. I direct AFT's National Agricultural Land Network, which is something that we started a couple of years ago that is intended to help build the capacity of those who are interested in saving America's farm and ranch land. It is a professional network really intended to build relationships and information sharing amongst folks, planners, farm organizations, conservation organizations, service providers, anybody really looking to think about how we do more to reduce the conversion of farm and ranch land. I'll talk a little bit more about it at the end, but we hope you all will join. I'm also AFT's Senior Policy Advisor. I specialize in farmland protection policy, as well as land access and farm transfer, and farm viability. And with me this morning, I'm very happy to have Kara Heckert, who is AFT's Resilient Agriculture West Advisor. Formerly, she was AFT's California Director, and it's great to have her with us this afternoon. So with that, let me take just a minute to talk about American Farmland Trust. For those of you who don't know much about us, we are a national nonprofit membership organization that was founded in 1980. We are also the only national agricultural land trust, and we do land protection projects. Some know us best by our bumper sticker, No Farms, No Food. The bumper sticker we had before this one said, "It's not farmland without farmers." And we did that because we understand agriculture. We take a holistic approach to it. We focus through our national initiatives and our regional programming, not just on protecting the agricultural land base, but also on the farming practices being used on the land and on the viability of the farmers and ranchers who steward the land, both the ones on the land now and ones who aspire to be on it in the future. Our programs and our research inform our state and federal policy initiatives and analysis. We work, as we say, from farm fields and kitchen tables to the halls of state capitals and Congress. We have 6 regional offices and a national office in Washington, D.C. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kara.
Thanks, Chris, and welcome to everyone. Thank you all for joining us. We'd like to recognize and thank USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service for their partnership and financial support of our Farms Under Threat research. Farms Under Threat is AFT's multi-year initiative to document the status of and threats to America's agricultural land base. NRCS has been invaluable to this entire research project, as has our research partner, Conservation Science Partners. For this report, we also collaborated with the University of Wisconsin-Madison.
Great, thank you. So now Kara and I are going to go off camera so that we're going to dive into the methodology and the findings, and you all can see the charts and the maps in larger screen. So let's start with the first two Farms Under Threat reports. Those were Farms Under Threat, State of America's Farmland, that we released in 2018, and Farms Under Threat, State of the States, that we released in 2020. Those two reports mapped past conversion of agricultural land. First looking from 1992 to 2012, and then from 2001 to 2016. In this report, we're looking forward. We're using past conversion data to model and predict future conversion of farm and ranch land out to 2040. So we started with that Farms Under Threat, State of the State ag land conversion data, that 2001 to 2016. And as a reminder, that analysis mapped conversion of land to two different land types. And we're going to talk about these right now: urban and high density development and low density residential development. So let's look at the continuum of what we mean by these two types of conversion. Urban and highly developed land is the traditional culprit in farmland conversion. It's been mapped and tracked for many years, and it includes commercial, residential, and industrial areas commonly found in the sort of growth outward around cities and towns. It also includes some rural industrial sites. So oil and gas infrastructure and solar development will be tagged as urban and highly developed land. Basically, anything that can be identified by satellite remote sensing is built up. Low density residential development has become a more pervasive culprit in farmland conversion. And AFT worked with conservation science partners to pioneer an approach to map and quantify the impacts of this type of development on the agricultural land base. So these low density residential areas can range from smaller subdivisions to larger farmettes and ranchettes. Typically, this scattered large lot housing fragments the agricultural land base and makes production harder for the remaining farms and ranches. It's important to note, though, that some agriculture can be found on these low density residential development areas, and smaller farm parcels, especially those that are near urban areas, can be quite profitable. However, our research has found that once land has been converted to low density residential land use, it is far more likely to be further developed to urban and highly developed land. So, starting with this historical data from 2001 to 2016, we projected into the future with a business as usual scenario. Basically, we made a straight line projection using the same conversion rate as that conversion that occurred from 2001 to 2016. We adjusted the model to account for projected population growth or decline. Building off of that business as usual scenario, we developed two alternative scenarios, which we'll talk about in a minute. For each of the three scenarios, we also mapped the coastal flooding risk that is projected by sea level rise. Once we had that projection of both conversion and flooding risk, we quantified the effects of these scenarios looking at two different things. We looked at what type of land would be most likely to be converted, so is that cropland or pasture land or rangeland, as well as on the quality of the land that would be likely to be converted. And there we used a productivity, versatility, and resiliency index that we created in 2020. So as with any modeling exercise, there are some caveats. You see these here. We were not able to account for local zoning. Land use regulations are inherently local, and there's no national database of them. So this means that our maps represent the general pattern and rough amount of conversion that is likely based on those conversion patterns from 2001 to 2016. They do not reflect what may be allowed or prohibited on the ground through local land use regulations. Our modeling also does not include the impact of water scarcity and potential fallowing of land because of water scarcity or salinization. And we know that water scarcity for Arizona in particular is a very important piece of the equation. Mapping the impact of water scarcity involves a complex interplay of many variables and was simply beyond the scope of our analysis. We did include in the web app a data overlay from World Resource Institute's Aqueduct, which offers some projections about water availability in the future. So here are the three scenarios we modeled. First, business as usual. Again, that's that straight line projection based on the 2001 to 2016 data out to 2040. The second scenario is what we call runaway sprawl. So this envisions a scenario where sprawl actually gets worse. And this, we look particularly at sprawl being that low density residential development that could be driven by continued high housing costs in more urban areas and by increasing work opportunities that are remote and that could be improved by rural broadband as it expands. Some parts of the country may already be on this runaway sprawl trajectory. Lastly, we modeled the future we hope for, better built cities. This scenario envisions successful efforts to reduce the footprint of residential, commercial, and industrial development on productive ag land. While the scenario still results in the conversion of some farm and ranch land, it envisions a future with vibrant, compact cities and towns and abundant farm and ranch land to meet the needs of the future. So let's look quickly at the assumptions that went into these scenarios. Again, business as usual, historical rate adjusted for population growth. And that population growth adjustment was only for urban and highly developed land because there is a strong correlation between population growth and expansion of urban areas. In runaway sprawl, we left that rate of urban and high density development as is, but we increased by 50% the rate of low density residential conversion. And in better built cities, you see that we reduced the rate of conversion. We assumed that cities and towns could grow more compactly, so 25% reduction in that rate of conversion, which we know is possible based on some examples of cities and towns who have done that. And we took a more ambitious, but we felt achievable suggestion of a 50% reduction in that conversion of land to low density residential development. So now let's look at the impact of each scenario. The gray bars here on the left you see are the 11 million acres that were actual conversion in just the first 15 years of this century. And then you see the dark rust is that urban and highly developed land conversion, and the lighter orange is that low density residential development. And under business as usual or worse, runaway sprawl, we could see nationally another 18.4 to 24.4 million acres converted or threatened by conversion. Conversely, if we look at the better built city scenario, we could get that conversion down to 11 million. I'll stop there because some people might be thinking 11 million, that's still a lot of land converted. Is that really the best case scenario? AFT appreciates that development, including renewable energy development, is necessary and the need for affordable housing options is acute. While it may be possible for cities and towns to be even more compact in their growth, and we hope they can be, we chose what we believed to be a realistic scenario. So these next two slides we hope are helpful in showing how Arizona compares to other states. This slide shows the projected total acres converted by county. You can see here that the darker red and really very, very dark rust shows in Arizona counties with a significant amount of projected conversion. You see this as well in Southern California. The next slide looks at the percent of agriculture in each county that is projected to be developed. When you look at Arizona, obviously, given the size and scale of agriculture in the state, you don't see as much red there as you do in the eastern part of the state, where agricultural land base is smaller and there's lots of conversion threat. But let's look at this next slide, because this is a chart of two charts actually of the top 12 most impacted counties in the country. The chart on the left is total areas projected to be converted, and there you see that Maricopa tops the list of all of the counties in the country with the most projected conversion. The graph on the right is the cropland acres that are projected to be converted. And there you see Maricopa also leading the way in terms of total acres of cropland at 34,600 that are likely to be converted based on our projections. So another key finding relates to impacts on our very best agricultural land. For previous reports, AFT created the first ever index of agricultural land quality that looked at the productivity, versatility, and resiliency of land, or what we dubbed its PVR values. Land over a certain PVR threshold is land that we consider to be nationally significant land, meaning land which is best suited for long-term cultivation and food production. What we find in our future projections is that conversion of this land is likely to be higher than conversion of all agricultural land. Why? Because for the same reasons that it is most productive, because it's well drained, it's flat, it's relatively free of rocks, it is also easily developed. The loss of this land is especially concerning. This is land that can produce the highest yields of crops and livestock with the least environmental impacts. Our modeling shows that nearly half of the projected conversion from 2016 to 2040 will occur on these kinds of lands, even though they represent less than 40% of the agricultural land base. The more nationally significant land converted, the more reliant we become on marginal land for food production. And to put this potential loss of 9 million acres of nationally significant land in perspective, the total acreage of land in the U.S. devoted to all fruit and nut and vegetable production is just 10.4 million acres. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kara, who's going to talk a little bit about solar development.
Thank you, Chris. One of the other threats we are highlighting with this report is the threat that solar development poses to agricultural land. And just to be clear, American Farmland Trust supports renewable energy development. However, we think it's essential that we plan carefully so that our most productive, versatile, and resilient land is not compromised. We also think it's possible for agriculture and solar to coexist in mutually beneficial ways. This map shows the projected acres of utility-scale solar photovoltaics energy generation facilities by state in 2040. It's a mouthful. This data comes from the decarbonization with electrification scenario of the U.S. Department of Energy's Solar Futures Study. That study estimates there will need to be 7.4 million acres of utility-scale solar in place by 2040 to meet the Biden administration's energy goal. This map shows the percent of undeveloped land projected to be used for solar development based on that same DOE Solar Futures study. We did model conversion of land to solar development, but did not include that data layer in this report because of issues with the data. There is some information about the solar modeling results in our solar technical paper that is available through our Farmland Information Center, which we'll be giving you information about later. We will also be releasing a solar white paper later this year. The most important findings were that 83% of the projected solar development by 2040 will be sited on agricultural land, and nearly half of that projected solar will be sited on nationally significant land. We're now going to dive into the data available for Arizona and our interactive website. And for this, we're going to be joined by our colleague, Beth Frazier, who will be our navigator. And thank you, Beth.
Great. Thank you so much, Kara, and thank you, Beth. So we are now in the website, and Beth is going to put a link to the website in the chat. When you get to the website, you get to this cover page that talks a little bit about what we did, what we found, summary information. To click out of it, you just go to that little X up on the right-hand side and click out of it. Let's take a minute to look at what else you can find up there in the right-hand corner of the website. You see a how-to tab up there. That takes you to about a 5-minute video that explains how to use the various scenarios and the data layers in this research. The View Report tab takes you to our Farmland Information Center that Kara just mentioned, where you can find the full report, you can find an executive summary, you can find that solar technical report that Kara just mentioned, and you can find information about the prior reports, including the state of the state reports. We are making our geospatial data layers available to anybody who would like them. And if you would like them, right up there in that right-hand corner, there's a Request Data tab, takes you to this link. And again, you just fill out the information and what you are looking for, and we will be back in touch to get you the data. So now Beth is going to zoom us in to Arizona. And so when you're here, all you're going to do is you go to the state. When you click on it, it will automatically populate with information down below. And so on the left is statewide data for Arizona. And on the right, because Beth happened to have her cursor on Maricopa County, that's the county that came up. So what do you see here? Again, you see the darker red, which is the projected urban and highly developed land, and the lighter orange is the low density residential land use. And so you see in Arizona, and even more so in Maricopa County, that what we are projecting is more on the urban and highly developed land, sort of moving outward from existing urban areas, as well as, again, potentially some rural infrastructure happening. You look at it, Arizona as a whole, under business as usual, projected to lose 444,000 acres of farm and ranch land. Again, you see the numbers on the right for Maricopa County, and this is one of the useful things that we hope will be useful about this report, is that we are providing a lot of county level data that we think will be valuable to folks as they think about trying to save and retain their agricultural land base. So let's go down a minute and just see what else other information you get on this page. You see here, as we mentioned, how much of Arizona's best ag land will be converted or projected to be converted. And again, you see here, this is those productivity, versatility, and resiliency values, those higher value lands. And here you see 247,000 acres projected for the state as a whole under the business as usual, and 290,000 under runaway sprawl. Going down, looking at the type of land that is likely to be converted, here you see cropland at 65,700 acres. The vast majority of land likely to be converted is rangeland at 377,000 plus acres, with just a little bit of pasture land. And this woodland, just a note about the woodland number, it's not forest land in Arizona, it is or all forest land in Arizona, it is woodland associated with a farm or a ranch. This was a unique addition to our research in 2020, where we were able to identify that woodlands that were associated with farms and ranches. And so we include the conversion of this land as part of overall conversion. And if you go down further, just this last sentence, that you note what we say when we've looked at every state and analyzed how much land that was in low density residential development in 2016 was going to be further converted to urban and highly developed land. And you see in Arizona that number is that it's 29 times more likely that land in low density residential development will become more heavily developed by 2040. So with that, let's take a minute to look at the 2-page summary for Arizona that we hope folks will find useful. We made these summaries so that they could be printed off and easily shared with folks. We encourage you to use them as an educational tool with policymakers, with your members if you work for an organization, with county planners. Again, they are intended as an educational tool. So you see here again that 444,000 acres projected as converted. What we have done in these summaries is to translate that into estimated losses of numbers of farms and ranches and economic output. And here you see that translates into 1,100 farms, $203 million in lost farm output, and at least 1,700 jobs associated with the agricultural industry. And just a note there, we used the numbers from the 2017 Census of Agriculture to derive those additional output numbers. And down below you see here are the 3 counties, and we'll talk a little bit more about them, that are the hardest hit in the state. Again, we're going to look at a couple of those when Kara takes us on a tour through the website. But just, you see here, the second page of this has more useful information and more conversion data that we hope will be helpful to folks. So with that, I'm going to stop, and Kara, aided by Beth, are going to take us on a deeper dive into some of the counties in Arizona.
Great, thank you, Chris. And so we're going to take a little tour here and look at, probably look at all 3 of the most heavily hit counties, starting with number 1, Maricopa County. So Beth is going to choose this county to profile and show you the different scenarios. So on the left would be runaway sprawl in the drop-down menu. And on the right, we're going to choose better built cities. So I think if we zoom in, yeah, great, Beth. It's pretty easy to tell where things are going to be projected to be built out in Maricopa County. On the west, definitely looks like the majority, and some down towards Gilbert and Chandler. Maybe go down a little bit further, Beth. There you go. Obviously, there's other factors at play, like we mentioned, the inability to look at water scarcity is a challenge with this report, and we certainly acknowledge that there are groundwater management areas with a lot of competing interests for water resources, and that will no doubt have some impact on where land is developed. So with that, let's move on to Pinal, where Phoenix, I don't think that's right, I think Pima County. Oh, Pinal, just south. Thanks, Beth. So just south of Phoenix, we're again looking at runaway sprawl versus better built cities. A little bit harder to tell on this, but you could see mostly around Casa Grande and some of the more eastern cities in that county. And south, there's projected to be quite a bit of growth. And then lastly, we're going to go down to Pima County, Tucson area, take a look at that. Same scenarios, runaway sprawl and better built cities. You can see quite a bit of development happening up north and expanding. Kind of the counties are going to start meeting one another if they haven't already, kind of similar to what has happened in Southern California and down south along the interstate. So this is a great tool to be able to focus more closely on what might be happening in your county and share with others, especially in land use planning departments and groundwater management areas and other folks that are looking at farmland protection. And with that, I'm back to Chris.
Great, thank you. But just as I see Beth has
Sorry.
turned on the satellite image, so
Thank you, Beth.
again, this is just to notice that in fact you can, if you look up on the right-hand sides, there's an opportunity to switch the way that you look at things, both with the satellite imagery and then the standard one. Do you want to switch to that, Beth? And Beth, again, this is in some way when you're looking for just a straight visual to be able to see sort of where some of the location is of projected conversion. So with that, let's go back to the slide deck. And now that we've looked a little bit at some of the mapping, we want to take a few minutes to talk about action and what can all of us do to help choose an abundant future. A report has policy recommendations in each of these 4 categories and at every level of government. So if you are a county or a municipal official, a state legislator, a state agency employee, or a congressional staffer, we hope you'll find a recommendation in here that you would like to champion. Please let us know if we can provide you with any additional information about any of the policy ideas in the report. And if you are a farmer, a rancher, a landowner, a community advocate, someone who works for a farm or a conservation organization, we encourage you to share and discuss these recommendations with your elected and agency representatives and partners. So let me just take a minute to talk a little bit about each of these 4 categories, and then I'll turn it back over to Kara. Encouraging smart growth. So smart growth and compact development require a foundation of good local planning. Comprehensive plans are where the rubber meets the road in laying the foundations for land use regulations that can promote compact development and minimize development of a community's best farm and ranch land. We encourage people to get involved in their county comp plan design and review process. And we encourage states to support comprehensive planning and to create statewide goals for farmland retention that then those comprehensive plans can reflect on the ground. Protecting agricultural land. Congress will be writing a new farm bill next year. An important program in that bill is the Agricultural Conservation Easement Program, which helps to fund the purchase of agricultural conservation easements from willing farmers and ranchers. More funding for that program would help to protect more farm and ranch land in Arizona. Advancing smart solar siting. State and local governments can work to incentivize solar siting on existing development and on marginal agricultural land. Where siting occurs on productive ag land, communities can require best practices for the construction, the operation, and the decommissioning of those solar developments to preserve soil health, water resources, and the ability to farm the land during and after the life of the project. States can also invest in additional research around agrivoltaics or dual-use solar and provide incentives for dual-use solar development. And lastly, support farmland access. State and local governments can develop their own or help to fund extension or nonprofit farm linking efforts, essentially programming that is providing technical assistance to older farmers and landowners who are looking for a successor or someone to lease their land to, and assistance for farm seekers who are trying to identify and assess land access opportunities. This technical assistance can be extremely valuable in keeping farmland in farming. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Kara, who's going to talk a little bit about planning for agriculture and what she and AFT are doing to address ag land conversion in the region. So to you, Kara.
Thanks. So I wanted to just do a little deeper dive on what we call planning for agriculture, which is a critically important tool really in any county in the country, but in particular in some counties in Arizona. And this is happening sprinkled throughout the nation, but we definitely need to do more of it. So community planning is critically important to smart growth. As part of this planning, AFT encourages communities to plan proactively for agriculture. This involves these 4 basic principles that can work in tandem with efforts to plan for smarter, more compact development. So that includes inventorying resources, engaging farmers and ranchers, incorporating agriculture into community planning, and implementing tools to retain and protect agricultural land. And we mentioned the Farmland Information Center before, but you will be receiving a follow-up. And the Farmland Information Center has a lot of wonderful local examples about local planning for ag or planning for agriculture done right, so to speak. And I also wanted to mention in this vein that I am part of a new initiative at American Farmland Trust called the Resilient Agricultural West Initiative. And the goal with that initiative is to further our efforts in the Western United States to expand partnerships, programs, research, and policy work to help to protect farmland and support a new generation for farmers and support environmentally sound farming practices. And one of the main things that we're looking at doing in states like Arizona is doing a deeper dive on being able to provide technical and scientific research looking at the land and water intersection. And that may be critically important for Arizona, or it may not be. It is critically important for Arizona. So one of the things we are hoping will come out of this webinar is the opportunity to follow up with partners that may be interested in that. Obviously, water resources in Arizona are under extreme stress and will continue to be. And it's critically important that local planners are looking at future water supply reliability when they're making their land use decisions. So we have some tools that we've used in other states and deployed in places like the San Joaquin Valley in California that we're hoping to bring to Arizona if they are useful and can add value to the conversation and the decision making. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Chris.
Great, thank you, Kara. I think let's turn on our webcams for a minute. I encourage, we do not have any questions right now. If folks do have questions or want to offer any comments, please feel free to do that. Let me talk while we wait to see if there are any questions, just about these 2 resources here. I mentioned the National Agricultural Land Network. Again, we encourage any of you to join the network. It's wonderful in that it is free, but we are trying to expand our programming, particularly in the planning for agriculture and smart growth arena. We have lots of resources around farmland protection and how to create programs, how to think about agricultural conservation easements. So we encourage folks to join. The Farmland Information Center, just another little bit about it. It is a collaboration that we've had for many years with Natural Resources Conservation Service. It has information, everything from data. So if you are looking for how many older farmers and ranchers are there in Arizona, you could find that there. You can find information about policies both in Arizona and around the country. You can find lots of information around smart solar siting now there and around things like soil health. So if you are a landowner or somebody working with landowners, please feel free to reach out to the Farmland Information Center. They do have a call-in number, which is very useful, and they answer their phone. So encourage you to call. So let me take a minute. There is a question for you, Kara, which is, do you have a link where we can get more information on the work you just mentioned?
Sure, we'll send that in the follow-up. The Resilient Agriculture West Initiative is about 5 months old, so we don't have a web page yet, but what we do have is some of the things that I was talking about in the San Joaquin Valley looking at the land and water intersection and the research we did there that I think would be a good starting point for any conversation that people would like to have about exploring doing something like that in Arizona. So we'll definitely send those links in the follow-up with some more background explanation.
Right, that is great. Well, thank you, everyone. I don't see any more questions. Let me just say I'm grateful for all of you who joined us. It is exciting to see that there are farmland protection efforts underway in Arizona. It looks like there's a lot of good planning going on. We encourage you to keep at it and to see us as a resource. And with that, let me turn it to Kara for any final words before we close out.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone also for joining and hoping that this information will be very useful in the policy arena, but also just starting those conversations from a scientific, like, data point of view. You know, there's a lot of politics, of course, around water and land use, in particular in the West. And it's nice to have this framing of farms under threat as a starting point in a conversation. And I'm certainly open to be contacted about future partnership possibilities in Arizona with local partners and American Farmland Trust. So just wanted to thank everyone else for joining us again, and feel free to contact us through all the channels we mentioned.
Great. Thank you. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye-bye.